Aloha and welcome to our Risk Topics Zoomcast. I'm your host, Jerelyn Sullivan with First Hawaiian Bank in the Institutional Advisory Services Division. Our topic today is supply chain risk finance issues. We'll explore what it is, how it works, and its impact to risk finance and insurance. Joining me today is David Beyer. David leads the risk management practice for the Alaska Air Group companies, which includes Alaska Airlines, Horizon Air, and McGee Air Services. Risk management at Alaska includes all aspects of insurance and alternative risk finance for the three operating entities. David also leads Alaska's Hawaii-based captive, ASA Assurance, and as part of Alaska's commitment to the Hawaii captive, David serves as vice chair of HCIC. David is a licensed attorney and a 16-year veteran at Alaska Airlines. Also joining us today is Allan Smith. Allan is Senior Vice President, Client Service Leader, Arizona Office Head, and Western U.S. Captive Sales Leader on the leadership team of Marsh Captive Solutions. David and Allan, welcome to our podcast. Allan, let's begin with you. Tell us about your background and your holistic view of supply chain.
Well, thanks, Jerelyn. So I'm 24 years at Marsh now. I've had the privilege of working in Canada. I moved to the United States in 2000 and did large property and casualty placement. And then I moved over to the client servicing area and now lead our captive team for the West part of the United States. And so I have a fair bit of background about various aspects, but I really wanted to get into the supply chain component because it's a lot more than just buying cargo or buying shipper's interest coverage for many companies. I want this audience to think bigger than that. I want us to begin at this holistic area of thinking about the entire supply chain. That comes from raw materials, beginning maybe it's in the field or in the mine. It goes to a manufacturing site. From there, it goes to shipping companies. It could be, again, like David's company. It goes for freight forwarders and brokers. It goes to ports. From the port, it goes to ground trucking and distribution, to warehouses, to last mile delivery. There's a lot of components along the way that when we think about supply chain, there's a lot of things that touch that, and a lot of companies in each of those segments that make those steps happen. So what are some of the factors that are critical to those? People, as we think about the supply chain today, COVID happened and we couldn't get toilet paper, right? Now it's the price of aluminum is going up. There's many things that are going on across that supply chain that create bottlenecks and impact each of our ability to source that. A manufacturer yesterday I spoke with said they couldn't get foam for packing, and that was a big element. So, but why? People shortage, again, back to people. So even before our COVID and before these challenges, people were always a concern. We had a driver shortage that was causing some pressures on our distribution systems. So what was happening in that? In some cases, it was response by technology. Technology was becoming an overlay. We saw for a long time manufacturing going to robotics. We saw alternatives to help the cost of technology as an overlay to lower those barriers. Today, we see even more of that investment. Think about this driver shortage that we've got with companies coming out that are artificial intelligence companies. They're now creating a product in a cab that can have a tractor nose to tail and go multiple vehicles down a highway driven by one person at the beginning, where each of them follows along. And so this becomes a response technology to solve problems that are being created. Well, how are some of those other solutions, or what are the other demands going to happen? So part of it is transparency. This ESG that's rolling out in our society today has customers creating demands of transparency through our supply chain. So they no longer just want to know what store or what retailer they bought that at. They want to know where it came from. They want to know who manufactured. They want to know where the materials came from that the manufacturer got. They want to see that transparency through the entire supply chain. And they want to know that the participants that got them there are also creating and demonstrating the same kind of values that they have, social values, and that they have as a buyer. The other things that we've seen from supply chain, just to help level set the stage, is this: we talked about these customer demands of transparency, but there's other customer demands. Now, all companies that are distributors are required to be like Amazon, or, hey, I ordered it yesterday, I want it today or tomorrow, right? So the lack of patience that we have as customers are demanding a perhaps different way that manufacturers are sourcing or storing or supplying. Now, as we see with Amazon, things become more regional. You can't wait to source something across the ocean anymore, when that's got to be there tomorrow. So now there's regional warehousing that's being set up that are trying to be responsive to these customer demands. Again, from sourcing to regional warehousing, but also to last mile delivery and how that's being accomplished. So we're seeing new and innovative things on drone, and this time in some future year, we're going to have drone delivery to a spot on our doorstep, and what are the implications of that, both politically? How is the FAA responding? How is the licensing happening? If you understand sort of these dominoes that happen through this broader supply chain, there are many factors that come in, and in various pinch points, there are ways that it slows down, and there are technologies that come into play to be able to have that release those pinch points, to lower the dependency on labor, or to speed up the process or manufacturing, to lower expenses and make it more cost effective, or to diminish errors or waste along the way. So I hope that I've sort of set a broad framework about sort of some of the challenges and then the holistic aspect of supply chain. And now we're seeing the role of a risk manager and the risk department, coming out of the silos of just property and casualty and becoming more of an enterprise risk play. And so I think probably with that, David's a great example of that. And let me turn it over to David to talk a little bit about what Alaska's doing in their element from a supply chain aspect.
Thanks, Allan, and thanks, Jerelyn. Airlines are not unlike many other industrial organizations. We need aircraft, so we need heavy equipment. We need parts to maintain those aircraft. We need office supplies. We need tools. The typical things you would expect to run a transportation business. But there's two big areas of concern in the supply chain of airlines that I want to highlight. And those are two areas that really have been in the news lately. So one is the shortage of people, and two is sustainability. On the people front, there's news pretty much every day coming out about pilot shortage and the inability of airlines to operate the schedule that they had planned because they're out of pilots. It's a big concern for the industry, and something that we're having to look at more holistically as we think about through the appropriate solutions that we want to come up with so that we can be sustainable and grow our business. On the fuel side, as Allan mentioned, there's ESG is at the forefront, and the airlines are big consumers of fossil fuels. And so we want to be good stewards of our environments. And so we're looking to find new and innovative ways to power aircraft, and whether that's through cooking oil or an E-jet or hydrogen power, these are all new areas and new supply chains that we have to identify and then plan through for resiliency. I think the key focus and the key thing that you will hear over the next year to 5 years is pilot shortage, and it's probably going to be the highest focus for the airlines.
Yes, so that is truly a large impact for your company. And I'm just, for Allan, have you been seeing some of the other experiences with the companies that you work with in terms of the disruptions of recent, with COVID, with the war, global inability of all materials and personnel shortages, as David mentioned?
Yeah, I think what you heard from David is endemic across most companies. You try and go get a latte, and my Starbucks was closed early because they didn't have staff, right? I mean, I think a lot of our businesses are feeling those kind of pressures socially. Our people are thinking differently. Their quality of life is becoming more of a demand over work, and the way that they think about a relationship with an employer becomes different. So we're seeing that impact through the supply chain. When we think about more broadly, when we think about, oh, how does insurance happen? How does that work? Yeah. I think there's some obvious ones. Hey, gosh, I can buy cargo insurance, or I buy shipper's interest insurance, or I invest in these programs for my employees. Freight forwards have been using captives for years as an ability to offer an insurance product through but what are sort of more obvious things? Well, we talked individually about each of those aspects of the supply chain. We talked about different elements of who are involved in the supply chain, manufacturers like this, or for example, the airlines. And they've been using captives for quite a while in financing or funding their own risks. But how are captives being utilized sort of in newer ways? So we talked about AI, and we talked about that company that's building an AI to overlay into cabs of truckers. The problem is, this is new emerging technology. The commercial marketplace doesn't have a good understanding about how to ensure that. What are the risks around that? And so captives can create a unique tool as part of that funding and that financing to get that, a company like that over the edge, and to be able to issue their product across the platform that others may not be able to. And so the captive creates a value-added solution as a tool to help those things advance. Think of other aspects like electric vehicles. So new and emerging technology across all of these platforms are being supported by captives and the innovation of captives and their usage. So it's really just a lateral thinking exercise about how do we employ those in the next stages. Now, David, how is Alaska Airlines sort of thinking about risk, and maybe how do you think about what you put in your captive?
Yeah, thanks, Allan. Alaska Airlines is a North American-based airline. Our main city focus is Seattle, but we fly into Canada, Mexico, and some countries in Central America. Pretty regionalized compared to the worldwide industry. I will note that we do have nonstop flights to 4 Hawaii destinations from lots of West Coast gateways, from far north as Anchorage down south to San Diego, and provide a great service for that. But we have our focus of where we're flying, but our industry is worldwide, and issues affecting supply chain are worldwide. And so if you take, for example, the war in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine has created sanctions in the finance and leasing industry that have made repercussions come through the industry and affecting carriers such as Alaska, smaller carriers, larger carriers. related to the availability of aircraft from lessors and insurance cost to have the requisite insurance on an aircraft to land at an airport. So as we think about our risks, we're having to think local for where we're operating, but then we also need to think on a worldwide basis and what can we do and what can we use our captive to ensure that we have smoothing of our costs of risk, but then also as we're thinking ahead to cover the issues that are coming at us. So finding alternative risk programs to provide insurance for upstart aircraft manufacturers who are maybe looking to enter and provide electric batteries and hydrogen fuel. Providing insurance to pilot training schools that need to flow through candidates. So these are things that are not available on the traditional market for insurance. So we're having to look to our captives to offer more products.
So I hear you say that effectively you're using your captive as a way to lower the hurdle from a business problem perspective and create solutions along those lines.
Yeah, it's part of one of the many tools in the toolbox to help us ensure that we can smooth out hurdles. So it could be a hurdle of a government requirement on a level of insurance, and we're working with a vendor who is in no position to get there because they're just too small. Can we employ the captive to help them get there? Because they're doing great work, but we have this arbitrary number that they've got to get to. So those are the things that we're looking at.
Those are great insights. They really are. And as we are probably at our last question now, just looking ahead, we've talked about some of the opportunities that you've seen, but I'm just wondering if looking forward, given everything you've come through, do you see a couple of things that you can leave as conclusions for yourselves and or some of our other captive members here with the captive insurance industry?
Jerelyn,
go for it.
No, I'm just because maybe I'll start to answer. And I see from a broad perspective, I'm not dedicated to obviously the airline business, but what we see across our book at Marsh is a growth of premium in many different segments that tie to this, like cargo and marine liability, the aviation liability. We're seeing a 27% increase in premium year over year for marine liability and 20% in the aviation liability. Marine cargo, 7% increase from last year to this year. Cyber, it's huge impact to all of us through the supply chain, 54% increase in that. So we're seeing more and more captive owners utilizing their captives as a tool to take on risk and I think really look at where those inefficiencies are within a program to help them stretch and grow as their businesses start to pivot and also grow. So is that some of the areas you're thinking about, David?
Yeah, I think how I would answer the question is that the thing to focus on is flexibility and using the captive to expand the bounds of insurance and provide resources to help move the business forward. So whether it is, cyber is a big one. You touched on that. It's a weird market, and it's one that I think every client out there wishes it would turn on a dime, but it's not. And so using the captive,
turning the wrong way on a dime.
Well, yeah, maybe. Seems like it's just a straight shot up. But using captives and companies using their captives to force changes in the marketplace, I think will help. I think it'll help steer things in the right direction and encourage the industry to move quicker and also become more flexible.
Great insight, David. Focusing on flexibility and using your captive to expand the boundaries of insurance is the goal. David and Allan, thank you again for your insights regarding supply chain and risk finance. And on behalf of David Beyer, Allan Smith, and the Hawaii Captive Insurance Council, we thank you for joining us today.